We live in a world of disruptions. Iran war has further complicated the situation. As nations test their anti-fragility and economies look for black swans, the larger political and philosophical questions remain. Iran war has triggered a fresh debate on rule-based order, justice, and human rights. I have with me Dr. Kingshuk Chatterjee, who's a professor in the University of Calcutta, and he's a well-known expert on Iran. He joins me from Kolkata online. Welcome, Kingshuk.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So let me begin by asking you, because you have traveled in Iran extensively and you must be keenly following the developments in Iran. What is the public sentiment in Iran?
The public sentiment is very difficult to gauge from outside the country. As you know, the internet has been very patchy when it's available. But what is coming out, the chatter that is coming out, is just that there is not much sympathy for the supreme leader who was passed away in many circles. But there is a kind of grim realization setting in that this is not the work of liberators. What the Israeli and the Americans are claiming to do is nothing like the liberation of the people from a repressive ruling establishment. The death toll having mounted more than 1,000, and this does not seem like subsiding any point of time, anytime soon. There is a kind of grim kind of reconciliation with this unpleasantness and this danger all around. There is a great deal of scaremongering being done on the airwaves, but the real experience of being bombed in real time is much worse than is done by the scaremongers. So it's very
difficult
fearful,
to gauge,
to say the least.
Right. So now, how have the groups which were up against the government before the war began, how are they reacting to the war? Any inputs on that?
No, because unless you are following media which is based outside Iran, such as Iran International, there is no other access to finding out exactly what the people on the ground are strategizing, if they are. And if they are strategizing, it is very unlikely that they will do it. They will do it online. But occasional blips are coming out, such as the jubilation that was seen after the death of Khamenei. So there is a determination to continue with the struggle within the country. But I don't see any signs that anybody is welcoming what is going on, which is but natural.
Right. So, like Japan, Iran is known for its resilience, but Khamenei's, his killing has been indeed a major setback for Iran. Do you agree, or what are your views?
Let's put it this way. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was, you might say, 1 foot in the grave. He was in his late 80s. He's suffering from a terminal illness. Iran was preparing for his eventual departure. Now, that it happened in such a spectacular way for the revolutionaries does not ultimately deter from the fact that Iran was getting ready for this. Those who are protagonists of the establishment, they want the regime to continue, so they are trying to use his death even to their advantage. Those who are opposed to it are probably waiting for an opportunity to give another push, which will be coming. But it's very unlikely that it will come in conjunction with foreign attacks. So the opposition that was mounted inside the country is probably biding its time right now. If there was to be any display of such opposition, the chances are the war would be used as a smokescreen to unleash even more fierce repression, which is the reason why I would suspect right now you do not see much out on display. And there is also this additional point that just as people like President Trump are exhorting the Iranians to come out on the streets, Similarly, there are regular announcements being made on the streets of Iran that anyone found protesting against the regime in this kind of a situation will not be spared the harshest treatment. So even as something as far as execution is not being ruled out. So that has put a dampener, if anything, on the possibility of demonstrations alongside these attacks. But I would suspect, as had been the experience of the Iraq war, when the country is under attack, the Iranians seldom mount any major display of protest.
Right, but there's been a delay in naming his successor. Uh, do you think it is out of the security concerns, or there's something more than meets the eye? It's something.
Let us be clear on something. This selection is going to be by a body of 88 experts who have been clerics, but they have all been elected. So
Right.
they are representing different regional constituencies
Okay.
alongside the fact that they are clerics. And the manner in which this council operates is through, backroom operations. People would be making offers, people would be accepting them, there would be alignments formed, the normal process of selecting a leader. It is not a top down selection where one person is named and the 87 people would sign up to that, the name coming from the other one. So
Right.
it's not that, it does not work that way. If you have a very clear candidature, then it can theoretically take place in a very short while, as the first election did when Khomeini was selected. Even Khamenei's selection was arranged backroom by President Rafsanjani, who wanted Khamenei, whom he had a history of working with, to be made the leader. Right now, the Islamic, in fact, even without the war, the Islamic Republic's establishment was divided as to who was to follow Khamenei. Mujtaba does not have the clerical credentials. He does not have his father's political acumen. The only thing he has is connections with the IRGC. Now,
Right.
there is no reason to assume that would be necessarily the decisive factor. There could be other players whose names have not surfaced as yet. So, if you leave aside the war, this process would not have taken any less time. Whether it
Right.
is actually taking more tactically in order to delay the announcement, I would doubt that, because this would be kind of inviting a kind of uncertainty,
Right.
because the present in leadership council, it's sort of limited, it's impaired, being an interim council. So for the sake of the continuity of the Islamic establishment, it would be required to have the selection done as quickly as possible, but it also has to be acceptable to the people at a time when the people are actually very disgruntled with the regime. So it will not be a clear cut selection straight away, and it will not happen in the wink of an eye. So I don't think that tactical consideration of whoever you name will be killed, kind of a thing that Israel Katz had said, I don't think that is weighing down much on them.
Yeah. Do you think that Kurd rebels can be empowered by the U.S. and Israel to challenge Iran's defense capabilities?
Well, you see, the Kurdish groups operating out of Iraq have the advantage of a semi porous frontier because they know the terrain. It's not porous as such, but it is semi porous. The thing is, the six groups that are being exhorted by the Americans and the Israelis to get themselves involved, they are not armed very heavily. The heaviest they have, from what they say, if that is truthful reporting, is only a Kalashnikov. So unless the Kurdish groups are given much heavier fighting gear, their actual impact on the combat situation will not be very great. Except, however, they will be tying down a large number of troops in the northwestern frontier of Iran, and that could certainly be decisive at a time when Iran's own other military capabilities have been badly worn down. But there is again no guarantee that this will come about, because Iran has maintained very good relations with the Kurdish regional government of Iraq. and the bombardment this morning could actually be a kind of warning of what might follow. So it cannot be taken for granted that the Kurds will either come or will not. If they do, they will certainly serve to tie down some Iranian soldiers in the northwest. But this would not be replacement for American boots on the ground, if that is the consideration.
Right, and there is a sizable population of Kurds, say about 3 million, as per my research. So, do you think that they can become a potent force which will create a major trouble for Iran in the days ahead?
The Kurdish population is actually much more than 3 million. And the Kurds make up a fair degree of the demographics in at least four major districts of north and northwestern Iran. Whether it would be a game changer, as the term goes, I very much doubt it. But in a combat situation, even if a small segment of the military is permanently deployed to keep down a segment of the population, that is already a bit of a problem. So, if a free for all begins in Iran, then the Kurdish factor would certainly be a major problem. But it would actually have greater repercussions regionally in the long term than perhaps in overthrowing the Islamic Republic per se.
Is the U.S. bombing, the Iran's bombing of U.S. Assets or bases and infrastructure in the Gulf region? Do you think it is really working for Iran?
Yeah, so let's be very clear. The reason why Iran was doing probably was so that it would bring some pressure to bear on America to reduce the severity of the attack, and if possible, to sort of draw the Americans down altogether. It has actually been somewhat counterproductive, because if Iran starts bombing even American assets across the Gulf, they're still infringing the sovereignty of their Gulf neighbors. So there was a lot of disgruntlement in the Gulf states, and there were even people who was arguing that this should be retaliated against, and some were even encouraging that the Americans should do the job thoroughly once they
Right.
have got about it. It is largely probably out of this consideration that just a while back, Masoud Pezeshkian, the president of Iran, managed to get the leadership council, the interim leadership council, to make a pronouncement that here onwards no further attacks will be carried out on the neighboring Gulf states unless their territories are specifically used to target Iran.
Right.
So this was a strategy that was beginning to be counterproductive, and Iran has actually reined itself back in.
Right. So now that Iran is controlling the Strait of Hormuz, by doing so, it appears that Iran's strategy is to create a world oil and energy crisis so that it could exert pressure on its enemies. Do you think it is the right assessment? Do you think that's the right assessment?
The Iranians, the way they look at it is very simple. This was a very asymmetric conflict. On
Right.
the one hand, you have the greatest military power that is there at present, backed up by the most powerful, the most formidable military machine in the region.
Right.
And Iran, by comparison with that, with no air defenses, no air force to speak of, nothing actually but for its ballistic missiles, it
Right.
was already it was stacked against Iran. So what the Iranians did was simply trying to make the conflict too costly for everyone, primarily for the Gulf states to start with by attacking them, as your previous question referred to, but also by creating situations in which the global oil prices would rise, and various world leaders would probably be weighing in on President Trump, and then the American market would also be doing it. This was the anticipation that Iran had, that if we block the Strait of Hormuz, then no oil would pass, and that straight away removes 1/4 of the global oil and gas supply, which would have sort of probably doubled the oil prices within a fortnight if it was to be carried out earnestly. So this was a very reasonable kind of assessment that they had. And the way the responses have been coming, it would seem that this assessment is about correct. Whether it is sufficiently persuasive for the American administration to bring them to draw down, that I'm afraid only time will tell. As of now, it does seem, and this is something you have to understand, this is not something that only the Iranians have theorized. The Americans have especially detailed war games played out on this theme, that what does America do if a hostile force is controlling the Strait of Hormuz, either Iran or Iraq during the earlier Gulf War periods. So this is an eventuality that everyone has factored in their calculations.
Now you mentioned about asymmetric war. Do you think that Iran will have an advantage, an underdog advantage on a, if we see it drags over a, span of time?
There are two factors that have to be taken into consideration. On the one hand, what is the kind of arsenal that Iran has in terms of its ballistic missiles, long and short distance alike? If their production has been as hampered as the Americans and the Israelis have led one to believe, and if their launch capacities have been somehow compromised, then that might explain why Iran is shooting less and less missiles over the last few days.
Right.
In that case, there is very little advantage to be gained out of this the asymmetry or the underdog advantage, as you call it. On the other hand, if Iran, by using its drones, is making Israel and American armed forces down there to exhaust their interceptor capacity, then maybe Iran is holding its real impactful missiles in reserve for a time when the interceptors have run out. The thing is, no country would actually let you in on its actual military, the size of its military arsenal. It may either exaggerate it or it may understate it.
Right.
If Iran has been understating its capabilities, then the conflict can go anyway. If Iran has been exaggerating its capabilities, then maybe you will have some kind of back channel diplomacy opening up very shortly.
Right, right. And do you foresee European countries being dragged into this war? Because, there are
I am
indications.
afraid Europe is so tied down with Ukraine, which is a threat much closer to its own neck of the woods, that I do not see any European intervention, either individually or collectively, that can make any kind of dent in this conflict either way.
So, it is difficult to say whether the resilience of Iran will be able to prevail over the joint, military might of both world's two most powerful nations.
Militarily, Iran is unlikely to be able to prevail. But Iran, remember, has shown this, that they can take a lot without wavering. That possibility cannot be ruled out. After 8 years of combat with Iraq, with fluctuating fortunes, 1 week is not even the beginning of the thing when you are testing their endurance.
But do you foresee a regime change happening in Iran? And if yes, how will it look like?
I would have said that Iran was preparing for a serious change in the Islamic Republic anyway. If you look at the protest movements and the increasing frequency, that the gap between two of these protest movements is now reducing dramatically. So I would have suspected that this would continue with or without the war. The war may actually give the regime an extra lease of life by making the people rally behind the flag for the time being and using the conflict once again as a smokescreen to remove identified sources of opposition. But now that Khamenei is no more and a new leader is on his way, the new leader is coming from the post-revolutionary generation. It's no one with any amount of role in the revolution itself. So you are looking at from a group of beneficiaries of the regime who do not have very high levels of acceptability. So unless there is a very serious change at the thinking of the Islamic Republic's establishment, in the foreseeable future, you would find reasonable amounts of political rumbling going, with or without this war. And if that thing happens, it can go either way. It can go for a more democratic regime, or if the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps manages to capture the power as it right now has in just about every wing of the Islamic Republic, then it might actually become more authoritarian, more driven by the guards' sectional interest, which what they would identify as the revolutionary interest. So it can go in either direction. There is actually no way of crystal ball gazing on this one.
And and how do you see the world change after the war just settles?
If you're thinking in terms of Iran, the real change is probably not there. The real change is in the realm of international law and its applicability in any given situation. Because in this particular attack, just about any definition you may have had of international law and international community, that's a very funny phrase now, it just seems to have been emptied of all its meanings. So, on the very first day of a combat, a head of state is removed from the scene, killed through a violent act. By what definition of legality is that even conceivable, let alone permissible? So, I have a suspicion that the world that we are now stepping into, as the Maduro incident also had indicated, is a much more lawless world than it used to be. I'm not saying that international law was the kind of thing you would expect in a domestic law and order situation where things are predictable all the way. But in the main, they tended to be predictable to prevent the possibility of greater conflict. 1945 onwards, there were actually serious attempts at multilateral diplomacy, multilateral legal approaches to conflict resolution without actual conflict. Donald Trump and Bibi Netanyahu, unfortunately, seem to have made the world a more dangerous place to live in. And the outcome will be on ours, on all our collective heads.
Sure, and it's a very dynamic situation, so we'll leave it at this. Thank you very much, Kingshuk, for joining us, and we look forward to having many such conversations with you in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.